Corsair, Apple Floppy Days, Commodore, Tandy Floppy Days, Atari, TI Floppy Days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC Floppy Days, SD Amiga Floppy Days, Junior Sinclair Floppy Days, Classic Days, Microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
The TRS-80 Model 3.
Introducing the Apple IIc.
Atari 1040 ST. Commodore 64. What?
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari. And his Radio Shack Color Computer 3. Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
For computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
The wonder computer of the 1980s. The Commodore VIC-20.
Hello and welcome to episode 141 of the Floppy Days Podcast for July 2024. I'm Randy Kindig, your host, as always, for this historical perspective on obsolete but still fun technology. This month I'm bringing you a follow-up episode from last month. As we discussed then, Paul Terrell is a name well known in the annals of computer history, probably most famously for his kickstart of Apple Computer through the purchase of one of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak's first batches of Apple I computers for his Byte Shop. The Byte Shop was a very early computer store that was one of the few that existed in the world at the time. In this interview, we continue to focus primarily on the Byte Shop, how it got started, what it was like, and much, much more. There will even be more content in future episodes, as Paul and I had a pretty lengthy discussion on just this topic. If you want to know what it was like to run a computer store in those early days, this is the interview for you. Along the way, you'll learn even more about just what the home and hobby computer scene was like in those days. Before we go on, let's not forget to mention some of the great storefronts that support our vintage computer hobby in a big way, such as 8bitclassics.com, run by my friend Corey Colts. He has video cables, power supplies, cartridges, upgrades, and a lot more for a wide variety of vintage computer platforms, and I get a lot of things from Corey and have over the years. Corey has been a friend of the show for some time, and I really appreciate his support of the podcast. Check out the site. He has some great stuff. And another great site is arcadeshopper.com, run by my friend Greg McGill. Greg has a wide variety of hard-to-find items for a really large number of platforms. This is another site that I've purchased a lot from and have mentioned numerous times on Floppy Days. If you find something on there that you want and it looks like it's out of stock, you can ping Greg and he can check whether he has it or can get more of the item for you. I also want to mention those listeners who appreciate the show enough to donate through patreon.com. I really do appreciate you guys. Regarding that, I want to remind everyone that I've created some tiers for paid members, and I've come up with some ways to reward those who are generous enough to monetarily support the Floppy Days Podcast on Patreon. First of all tiers of $2 per month and up will receive early access to companion videos for any interviews that are published. The audio will be published to Floppy Days immediately, as usual, while any video will be made exclusively available to all paid members for a period of time, at least 30 days, before the general public. The videos will be published for you on patreon.com and then moved to the Floppy Days YouTube channel after the exclusivity period is over. Other benefits have been added for the tiers above the minimum $2 tiers, such as Floppy Days merchandise, an audio introduction for supporters, and even the option to co-host an episode, which I would love to have happen. It's my intention to have all content available to everyone at no cost, while at the same time providing some benefits for those generous enough to support the podcast. I hope you agree with me that this is a good compromise. Please let me know your thoughts about it and enjoy the podcast.
Hi, this is Paul Terrell. Here's to the followers of Floppy Days, with a passion of the past events that ignited the personal computer revolution, from someone that was there at the time and a willing participant. I was involved in the first sales of Microsoft Basic to Data Terminals and Exidy Incorporated, which created the first software company in personal computing. And I bought the first 50 Apple I computers with a COD purchase order, which provided $25,000 of seed capital to start Apple Incorporated. The personal computer revolution is as significant as the Industrial Revolution was, and they say history repeats itself. A generation which ignores history has no past and no future. If you want to understand today, you have to search yesterday. So let's understand today with Floppy Days podcasts of yesteryear. Thank you.
Okay, now for new acquisitions and what I've been up to. So the big thing I've been up to this month was a trip to VCF Southeast in Atlanta, Georgia. I picked up a few new acquisitions while I was there, so this recount will actually cover both topics. First of all, I want to mention this is the first time I've been to VCF Southeast for about 5 years, I think. The last time I went, they were holding it at the Computer Museum of America location near Roswell in the springtime frame. My wife and I always enjoyed visiting Atlanta, as there's tons to do there, and while it's a full day drive from Indianapolis, it's a nice drive. We went to the first 5 or so events that VCF SE had, including the inaugural event. However, when it moved to the July timeframe and to a venue that was co-located with the large Southern Fried Gaming Expo, we basically quit going at that point. Who wanted to be in Atlanta in July? I hate heat. Who wanted to go to an event that was a crush of people? I'm a private guy and don't like large crowds. This year's trip to VCF Southeast actually was quite unexpected. My wife and I like to take frequent trips as we are both retired, and it gets boring staying home all the time. She came to me in the late May, early June time frame and said, "I want to take a trip in July. Are there any computer shows coming up you wanted to go to?" I just about fainted. That's not something I normally hear from her. I told her that VCF Southeast was coming up in July and that we hadn't been to that show or Atlanta for some time. As a bonus, our daughter and her family live in Tennessee and are pretty much on the way, so I started planning the trip to VCF Southeast. The VCF Southeast section of the Southern Fried Gaming Expo event is fairly small, particularly when compared to the rest of the event. It was located in a single good-sized room, but shared that room with some gaming gear. Nevertheless, it's a nice facility, and it was really set up nice with plenty of room for attendees to go through without being cramped. It had nice wide aisles. The Atlanta Historical Computing Society puts on the event, and they do a great job. All the members are helpful, and I've known many of them for years. Earl Baugh is the president of the group, and he was manning the check-in table. Even though I didn't decide to go to the event until just a month or 6 weeks before the show, Earl was able to get 2 tables for me. I really wanted 2 tables because I wanted one to display antique podcast information and have an Atari display, and a second table for Floppy Days and some other computers on display. I decided to go with a Luggables theme for Floppy Days and brought my Commodore SX64, IBM 5140 convertible, and Tandy TRS-80 Model 4P. I also have an Osborne Executive I would have brought, but it recently was recapped and I haven't put it back together yet. There ended up being a few empty tables in the VCF Southeast section due to no fault of AHCS. The CrowdStrike debacle happened just as the show was getting ready to start, and a couple of exhibitors were unable to make it. On the humorous side, I did win the first Smoke Award of the show. I didn't have the Tandy P on for more than 5 minutes probably before it started spewing rancid smoke. That caused quite a stir as several people came over to see the magic smoke and take pictures. Not quite the award I wanted to win. Now I have a 4P to recap. For the antique table, I had an antique sign and numerous stickers and cards for handing out to attendees. Those are always popular. One of my co-hosts for Antique, Brad Arnold, came to the show. He lives in the Atlanta area and is a member of the Atlanta Historical Computing Society, and brought an Atari 800 with lots of modern upgrades, such as the Incognito, Fujinet, A8 Pico card, and more. There definitely was a lot of interest in that. It was great to see Brad in person again, as the Antique hosts don't get together very often at all, with us being scattered around the country. Concerning new acquisitions, there was plenty of opportunity to pick up new items as the AHCS ran a consignment area in the show. There are a lot of cool items in there. In addition, there were lots of Atari and vintage game-related items in the Southern Fried Gaming Expo area throughout. In the Southern Fried area, I picked up a 3D printed Atari coaster that has a large Fuji symbol on it. It looks nice on my desk next to my TRS-80 Coco coaster. In the VCF SE area, I picked up a couple items for the IBM 5140 convertible. I mentioned that I brought it to the show for display. Well, there are numerous add-ons available for that machine, most of them pretty cheaply on eBay. The cool thing about it is that they attach to the back of the 5140 and they extend the machine's depth for each add-on, which can make it very, very long if you get, a lot of the add-ons that are available for it. I recently had gotten a display adapter that allows connecting a composite monitor or the IBM PC Junior monitor, which I have. At the show, I was able to get a new in-box serial parallel adapter as well for the machine, comically extending the machine even further. While there, I also got a new in-box power supply for it, as the one I had was somewhat mouse-chewed. The 5140 I have, if you don't recall from an earlier show, came from the barn find of 2022. Even further, I found that John Guidry, a member of AHCS and a friend, is somewhat into the machine and has an extra thermal printer for the 5140 he got from Computer Reset before it closed. It's on its way to me now. I can't wait to see how long this machine gets. Another big happening at the show involved one of the guest speakers. Just a couple weeks before the show, it was announced that VCF SE had managed to get Steve Leininger, the primary developer of the TRS-80 Model 1 for Tandy, to attend the show. Now, it turns out that talking with Steve has been on my bucket list for quite some time. And not only was I able to meet Steve at the show, but he agreed to an interview while we were there, and I got about an hour of material to publish soon on Floppy Days. Steve was very gracious, and I'm thankful to him for his patience and willingness to talk. That was pretty amazing. As I mentioned, VCF Southeast is held in conjunction with the Southern Fried Gaming Expo. Now, SFGE is very impressive, and if you're into gaming, retro or modern, this is a show you probably wouldn't want to miss. While I spent most of my time in the VCF SE section, I walked through the rest of the event and came away very impressed. The venue is incredible, and the gaming displays are amazing. Overall, it was a very fun event, and I want to thank AHCS for putting it on, getting me some tables, being gracious, and allowing me the opportunity to meet and talk with Steve Leininger. The only negatives I can say about attending the show have to do with Atlanta itself and not the show. Number one, hotels anywhere near the show are expensive in Atlanta, and traffic in and around Atlanta is horrible. Beyond that, I can highly recommend this show and will consider going again in the future. And that's it for what I've been up to this month.
Okay, this is Howell Ivy, the designer of the Sorcerer computer and one of the owners of Exity. And you are listening to the Floppy Days Podcast.
Okay, now for upcoming computer shows the remainder of the year. I do want to remind everyone I've created a shared list of the upcoming shows and published it to the Floppy Days website. You can go to the link provided in the show notes here, or just use the link that's available at floppydays.com, and you'll have access to the show list for the current year that I always keep updated. So first up here, as of this time of the year, next is Vintage Computer Festival West, August 2nd through the 3rd of 2024 at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. Silly Venture Summer Edition is August 15th through the 18th in Gdansk, Poland. Then the big one, VCF Midwest, is September 7th through the 8th at the Renaissance Schaumburg Convention Center in Schaumburg, Illinois. Recently got table information. I was able to get a table, so definitely will have a table at VCF Midwest. They just announced they also will have a larger venue than they even originally planned. I believe now it's going to be about 5,000 square feet of area for the convention center, which is incredible. So if you can make it, you should try to come to the show. I think it's going to be the biggest of the year. VCF Europe is the same weekend, September 7th through the 8th, but it is in Munich, Germany. The World of Retro Computing 2024 Expo will be that following weekend, September 14th through the 15th, in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Teletext 50, September 21st through the 22nd, at the Center for Computing History in Cambridge, UK. The Portland Retro Gaming Expo, September 27th through the 29th, at the Oregon Convention Center in Portland, Oregon. Tandy Assembly, another show I will be at, is at that same weekend, September 27th through the 29th, at the Courtyard by Marriott, Springfield, Ohio. Amy West, an Amiga show, October 25th through the 27th in Sacramento, California. The Chicago TI International World Fair, October 26th at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. The Retro Computer Festival 2024, November 9th through the 10th at the Center for Computing History in Cambridge, England. And finally, to round out the year, the Silly Venture Winter Edition, December 5th through the 8th in Gdansk, Poland. I certainly hope to see you at one or more of these shows the remainder of this year. And that's it for remaining shows.
My name is Vic Ptolemy. I was the Vice President of Software at Exity Inc. in both the Data Products Division and the Video Games Division for the 8 years, starting in 1979 through, it was 87. And I've been talking with Randy Kindig for the Floppy Days Podcast. And we've been having a nice conversation about those times.
Okay, now is the Meet the Listener segment. I want to remind everyone that I've created this new segment called Meet the Listeners. And last month I had an inaugural segment with Brian Cox. Now, I don't have any for this month, but I will publish them as I have them. And I want to remind everyone that I really would like you to provide content for this segment. All you have to do is produce a 3 to 5 minute audio file where you introduce yourself and your vintage computer journey. Tell everyone how you got started with vintage computers, what you had back in the day, how you got back into the hobby, what vintage computers you have today, etc. Then just send the file to me, the audio file, and I'll publish it on a future Floppy Days episode. Thanks in advance, and I really can't wait to hear your story. Okay, now we have the interview with Paul Terrell. This is part 2 of his discussion about the Byte Shop. Paul was the owner and proprietor of said Byte Shop. I do want to apologize for the quality of this. It wasn't the best quality. Paul and I ran into a few issues getting this recorded, but we're taking steps to make sure that any future interviews are of higher quality, and I hope it doesn't detract from the message and the really interesting story that Paul has to tell. So here's the interview with Paul Terrell.
Now, eventually, we did get to the point where we needed some legal assistance, and we were once again being in the heart of Silicon Valley. You would network with people that one of my salespeople knew a guy by the name of Larry Cincini, who was a lawyer in Palo Alto, and he happened to be the lawyer that had taken Intel public, and Larry was very interested in what Byte Shop was doing because he was representing legally a lot of the electronics companies that were getting into personal computing. So Larry and I developed a friendship where we got together, and I was able to convince him, since we were just a startup, to be a little bit lenient with his legal fees and provide us with some legal assistance. And of course, Larry expanded his business right along with us, and he's actually the dominant legal firm in Silicon Valley. He's taken most of the companies public out there. He very much focused in the area of public markets and finance and that kind of thing as he grew his company. And now he has a huge complex of buildings, a campus in Palo Alto, which is, in the old days, it used to be called Wilson, Mosier, and Cincini. And I think Mosier dropped out of the program. Rosati came in and so forth. But those were good contacts to have, in the marketplace, because once again, relationships. I met Bob Noyce from Intel, who was one of the founders of Intel, and through Larry's relationship and friendship. Another person that was really dominant in the success that we had at Byte Shop was Regis McKenna, and Regis was one of the people that had come out of the semiconductor business. He was over at National and had watched their success, and as those semiconductor companies were going public, and Larry was taking them public, they were also a source for a lot of technical people, good management, technical people, being able to cash out of the success that they had with the startup company they were involved with, to where they created a venture capital market in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and prior to that happening, there was very little funding available, and actually the initial seed capital that came in for Apple was from Art Rock, and Art Rock was a venture capitalist from New York City. So a lot of early startup money that was available to any kind of business was really. New York is the center of finance. Nobody's bigger than New York, and Chicago does well in the mercantile business, but in commodities and so forth. But New York is where the big money was, and there was really nothing in San Francisco other than some federal entities that the Federal Reserve was there and so forth. But and there was standard banking going on. Wells Fargo was headquartered there, and so forth. But these people weren't seed capital people. These people weren't providing funding for new business, and of course there was a ton of new business going on, as a result of all of these semiconductor outfits and so forth. So we were seeing a lot of new growth, and one good example of a venture capital startup was Don Valentine, and he was the first seed money into Apple, along with Art Rock, because Art's problem was he was located in New York, but he needed to have somebody out here that was looking after his money. So a lot of these venture capital people, and actually the big financial institutes from New York would team up with these new technical venture capital people coming out of these semiconductor companies. And Tom Perkins is a good example. Perkins Kleiner, these were semiconductor guys that got involved with venture capital, and Tom was one of the guys that I talked to about when Byte Shop got to the point where we needed additional capital to grow. I actually, when I ended up selling the Byte operation, I was opening 8 stores a month, and spending a lot of time on airplanes, and our growth factor was just limited by how much time I had available to get out there and get contracts signed and so forth. So, as I pointed out earlier, there were new industries that were being created as a result of the personal computer, and venture capital was one of them that really flourished to the point today where, when you hear about these company startups like Facebook and Google and all of the internet companies that have come out of it, a lot of those people were initially funded by all of the people that made their money in personal computing, and before we got into internet and what that was all about. So and as you pointed out, all these other computer stores across the country were coming into existence. The consumer was becoming very aware, of computer products. Video games was the big application
that really kicked everything off because the electronic companies could make video game machines, which the kids loved, and they could make them very inexpensive versus the cost of putting a computer into a home or an office environment. So, we started to see the marketplace expand with the advent of video games. And of course, that was coming from the coin-operated video games and arcades that were out there, accessible to the public and so forth. So there were more opportunities to be one-on-one with technology other than going to Paul Terrell's Byte Shops and participating in the greatest show on earth.
So a couple questions for you. Did you actually end up with dealerships in other countries besides the U.S. as well?
Yeah, the first country that we did business with was Japan. And I actually opened up the Byte Shop Sogo in Japan. Once again, what would happen is people that were traveling to the San Francisco area, maybe to a convention or business, got exposed to the computer stores, and they didn't have them in their countries. So they would take the time to look around and see what was going on there. And I had a gentleman from Japan who would come in, and of course, our computers weren't very attractive as products for him to sell, other than to people that understood English when he went back to his country. But of course, there were a lot of people in Japan, professionals that were multilingual, and once again, we were very fortunate in the computer industry, that almost, the leaders in the business, IBM and the such, they were English speaking, and so the languages and all of the materials were when they took computers to their country that were from here, they had to do translations and things. So that would have an effect on the amount of growth you could do there. But I was interested in doing a Byte Shop internationally from the legal trademark viewpoint, so we within the first year, when I was involved in selling and expanding the Byte Shop operation, I put the Byte Shop Sogo in play and got the trademarks that we needed in Japan. Once again, these things were additional expenses for us, so it wasn't something that I was actively pursuing with Byte Shop. But once again, after Byte Shop, I did a number of other businesses in Silicon Valley, and once again expanded a lot of those businesses internationally. But the stage was set, for the early pioneers, in the personal computer market, and the same thing was happening in their countries where magazines were getting involved in the business. It was more than just retail stores. You could find magazines, and of course the Japanese manufacturers, they were the ones that were making all the televisions and radio and electronic products for consumer electronics. So they were all interested in this category of either video game or personal computer. So they had their own local suppliers that they could deal with, and I think they were just looking at our operations over here in terms of getting a chance to see how it might evolve in their country, and what the opportunities would be. One of the things that I was talking about were the individuals, the Tom Perkins, the Regis McKenna, and the reason that I keep coming back to Regis McKenna is because Regis, being a advertising and public relations person, and his offices were right down the street from my Byte Shop. His people would spend a lot of time in the Byte Shop in Mountain View, and when anybody came to them, that they were companies that they were talking to about products, and being the advertising company for that particular product or company, they would bring them into the Byte Shop and show them our operation and what we were doing, and what potential market opportunities might be there. And through that association, I ended up hiring Regis to be the advertising and public relations for Byte Shop, and of course they were the advertising and PR for Intel. And Intel, a lot of these companies that were substantial companies with a lot of funding, they would do joint advertising programs. And so we were able, through our relationships with Regis, to be able to create a whole ad program based on an Intel engineer's son, Ricky, coming and visiting the Byte Shop. And then we could show off, we could talk about the Intel processor being the what's inside the computer. And you see a lot of that co-op advertising is what they call it today. And Intel pays a lot of the computer companies that buy their products and put them into the machine. They provide a lot of money for these companies. So if you see Intel inside, that's what that's all about. If the company puts a Intel sticker on their product, they're getting free money, from or from the supplier, from Intel. And so we were able to leverage a lot of the expense that we would have had with these relationships. And probably the most important relationship that Regis ever did for Byte Shop was he introduced me to Jack Wilson, who was the bureau chief for Business Week magazine out of San Francisco. And Jack would travel the Silicon Valley, visiting the computer manufacturers like Tandem Corporation, Apple. He would spend a lot of time over there. And by the way, Regis, I recommended to Regis early on that he get behind Apple once we started carrying the Apple products in the Byte Shop, and got Steve Jobs and him together. And once again, there was a lot of co-op going on between the individuals as we networked out there. But Jack Wilson was writing an article for Business Week about the technology and the microprocessors and what was going on in Silicon Valley. And they had a technology section of Business Week where people that were reading that magazine would go there and see what was going on new in the business. And so when Jack came down to see the Byte Shop, he was also looking at the Homebrew Computer Club. He was looking at what was going on with Tandem Corporation, with Commodore, with Apple, and so forth. And Jack was really amazed at the depth of what was happening with technology and the companies that were getting involved, and the extent of the products that these microprocessors were going to be in everything in your house. They were going to be in your refrigerators. They were going to be in your microwaves. They were going to be in your entertainment products and so forth. So he put together a story about Silicon Valley, and he interviewed me. And our interview took about 3 hours. When he came to the store, I took him over to Johnny Luigi and Johnny, Frankie, and Luigi's Pizza Parlor, which was 2 doors down from me. We spent lunchtime there and 3 hours talking about all of the things that were going on. And when in July of '76 is when the article came out in Business Week. And Jack called me up and said, Paul, he said, I really have to apologize. He said, we spent all that time talking about what you were doing and the computer club and the hobbyists and the computer stores and all. But he said, when I sent the content of my article back to New York, he said they cut out all of the personal computer stuff because it was just too lengthy. He said, I had like 12 pages of an article, and the technology section in Business Week is only about 1 or 2 pages, and they just wouldn't allow for it. So he said, unfortunately, your stuff isn't going to be in that magazine, and I apologize for it. And so anyway, when the magazine came out, I obviously bought a copy of it, read about all of these companies that I was mentioning before being highlighted in there. And then I got a call from Jack that following week, and he said, hey, he said, good news. He said, New York has decided to go ahead and run the personal aspect of it. And so I'm going to have your stuff printed. And so it'll be in the July 7th edition of Business Week. You might want to check it out. And when I got that magazine and it hit the street and the news racks, there was in the technology section, you opened it up, and there was a picture of me standing behind the cash register in the Byte Shop, and underneath the picture it said Terrell plans franchising in California. That was the title of it. And then it went into all of the things that we were doing with the stores and the hobbyists, the computer enthusiasts that were out there. And what basically happened is Business Week had whet the appetites of people with this huge article the previous week about microprocessors and what the future was going to hold. And then all of a sudden, the following week, they come up with a picture of me, and here's how you can make a buck at it. Terrell plans franchising. Well, let me tell you, all of a sudden, the mailman was coming to the Byte Shop in Mountain View, and he was literally dumping mail bags full of letters on the floor in my store. And he said, "You're the only Byte Shop in Mountain View. There's no address, 1063 West El Camino here, so I'm assuming that this is all your mail." And when I opened up these letters, it was people like the chairman of the board of Telex Corporation wanted a 3-state territory. They were down in Texas. He wanted Texas, Oklahoma.
Were these people wanting dealerships?
Yeah, the basically they were asking, how do they become involved with Byte Shop, and what the return on investment was, for a Byte Shop store. And, quite honestly, I'd never had any business like that. So consequently, I went to one of our directors, and I mentioned earlier, he also had contacts with the Tandy guy, Nugent, who was their finance guy down there. Well, when I went, his name was Jim Bowles, and Jim was on my board of directors. And so I was telling him that I'm getting all kinds of questions in these letters that I'm not familiar with. I didn't really have any college background, had not been to business school, and had joined the Air Force right out of high school. So a lot of the terminology that was being thrown at me was new, and ROI was the one, return on investment, and then how do we come up with an ROI? And what was interesting is that led into another inquiry that we got from a new magazine that had come out, and it was called Entrepreneur Magazine. And once again, who's an entrepreneur? I don't even know how to spell that one. And as it turned out, it was a brand new magazine, and for their first issue of the magazine, they wanted to do the Byte Shop dealership in the magazine. So they sent somebody out to me, and we sat down and went through the whole process of what it takes to actually become a Byte Shop dealership, complete with inventory, investments, talking about how to set up a store. It was really a very thorough job that they did, and we once again were being able to benefit from this concept of networking that was going on in the valley, and as I mentioned before, with the sales and marketing and now the business side of things, we were getting lots of exposure, to a broad market of people out there.
So I saw some of the stuff that Ray Burrell wrote, and he mentioned you. He mentioned your brothers, that you had, I think, two brothers that also had dealerships as well, and he was friends, I guess, with you guys.
Yeah, once the program got started in the Bay Area there, one of my brothers had just left college, and he came down to see what was going on in the Bay Area, and I actually hired a friend of his that had come out of college with him, and the two of them came down, and one of them went to work for Byte Incorporated, and then my brother, once he saw the activity that was going on in the Bay Area, and he was from Portland, Oregon, he decided that he wanted to go up to Portland and do a Byte Shop in Portland, and so we got him set up as the Byte Shop of Portland. And I actually had three brothers that got interested. One of them was back in North Carolina, and he was working for AT&T as an engineer with their computer group, Western Electric, and he was interested in doing a Byte Shop back there. And then the other brother that was up in Oregon, he decided that he wanted to do a Byte Shop in Seattle area. And once again, these were in Repco territories, at least the Washington and Oregon ones were. So they became, I think Byte Shop number 6 was the Portland store, and then Byte Shop 8 or 10 was the one in Bellevue, Washington, and then actually my brother that was back in North Carolina, his wife was a school teacher, and she was very interested in what was going on with computers and education, and particularly when Apple came out with the Apple II computer, there was a lot of software and things that were being developed in that area of education. So they actively got involved, the two of them, and did the Byte Shops back on the East Coast. So and then the brothers in the Northwest were so successful with their multiple stores that they decided that they wanted to get into distribution of computer products, and so they actually set up another company, Microware Distributors, became a distribution company for computer products and networking. And about that time, networking of these personal computers was really taking off, and there were companies like Cisco that were doing networking cards. Novell was a major software and hardware supplier for networking computers, and that whole part of the computer industry just exploded. So you weren't just looking for desktop computers to either do entertainment or business type of computer processing, but now the communications part of it was growing, and even to the point where that part of the industry had their own networking shows that they were doing annually, and we were seeing the show business part of computing really take off with Shelley Adelson came along and started the Comdex shows. And when I first met Shelley, he was looking to do a show that would deal just to dealers. It was focused on retailers and not so much the education part of computing or other areas. So Shelley's Comdex shows became shows that manufacturers who wanted to sell to dealers. It was a show where the people coming through the door were going to be dealerships worldwide, and if you wanted to sell to retailers, that's what you would, you'd go to a Comdex show. If you wanted to sell and have products in the communications area, you went to the networking shows. And about that time, the fall joint and the spring joint computer conferences had merged and become what was called the National Computer Conference. And so the NCC became a once a year major show. And that's the show that Apple, when they came out with the Apple II and they were going to the broad market, and they had gotten funded, they actually went to, the show was being held in Anaheim, California. And for all of the people at the show, when you went by their booth, they were giving you free tickets to Disneyland. They had bought out Disneyland for the night. And so to go to their hospitality for Apple, you got free admission into the Disneyland park. And just goes to show, the importance of the personal computing part of the business versus the professional part of the computing. When we went to the Anaheim show, the booth space that the show people offered to the companies that were involved in personal computing was out in the parking garage of the convention center. And so literally people were going from the convention center and walking around, and they had a couple of levels of the parking garage that was set up with booths and things. But it was becoming obvious to people in the show business that this was going to be something, when Apple is buying Disneyland Park for people to come to their booth, we need to get serious about all of these people. And of course, the other thing that was happening at these shows, there was hardware as well as software, the industry was really coming into its own at that time. And so my brothers, they ended up with retail stores as well as distribution. And after I had sold Byte Shop, they obviously continued on in both of those. And then IBM, when they introduced the IBM PC to the world, my brothers became one of the first retailers of the IBM PC. And IBM was being very controlled in terms of who they were allowing. They came up with something called a medallion, and to get an IBM medallion, they would take a review of your operation and see whether you were worthy enough, to carry their products. And once again, they were going to retailers like Sears. Sears and Roebuck was a IBM dealer. IBM did their own computer stores, and the chain of stores that had actually superseded Byte Shops was Computerland, and Bill Millard and Ed Faber. Ed Faber was the president of Computerland, and Bill Millard and Ed founded Computerland when they were a company in the San Francisco area called MSI, IMSAI, and MSI was at the time that I was doing Byte Shops, they were a supplier once again of an S100 bus compatible computer, and they were very successful in manufacturing the S100 MSI 8080 is what they called it, and they were competing with the Altair people, and actually were very good competitors, and they had better manufacturing capabilities. So there were hundreds, if not thousands, of MSI computers that I sold through the Byte Shops, and the Apple computers, and all of the other type of computers. But if you have a good thing going, you want to invite your family into the business. So and they were very successful with their Byte Shops in the Northwest. They ended up selling the stores out to Pac Bell when the phone companies had done their split up. The federal government came in and went after Bell for the monopoly that they had. And so you had the what they called baby bells regionally around the country that were the new phone companies, and they were looking for other businesses to get in besides telephones. The other interesting thing at this same time frame, you have to remember that we couldn't buy phones or computers back in those days. You were renting the hardware products from these companies, IBM and from Western Electric was the manufacturing arm for the AT&T is what it is today. And so we went through a period where all of the baby bells were thinking that they were going to be computer stores as well, and so they were out buying up the existing computer store chains that were in the marketplace. Businessland came along, following in the direction Computerland was going, and trying to be more specific for business. But a lot of the early pioneers in the retail business were able to take advantage of these buyout and exit opportunities that came along.
So you sent me some pictures, quite a few pictures of the old Byte Shop, and I was wondering, I'm going to try to share my screen here. I was wondering if we could bring those up and maybe just have you comment on those photos. Sound like fun?
Yeah, I could do that.
Let me see if I can get it to come up here. Do you see this photo?
Yeah, I do. I see that one. Yeah, that's the Byte Shop in Mountain View, and yeah, that's the one of the pictures is of the Mountain View store, and you can see that's actually a pretty good picture of the front of that store because you're looking at those where the Byte Shop signs are. Those are over the windows to the street. You can see a couple of cars parked in front of it, and actually the window on the left-hand side there is where we had a big 25-inch color television set running the Krememco Dazzler card on a Altair computer so that people just driving along the road would see this. We had a kaleidoscope piece of software that one of the people that would come in and visit in the store actually wrote the program on our computer there. And I think if you could do a close-up, which I don't think you can do for this presentation, but I think you see the sort of the back of somebody sitting there in the window, and that was probably the guy, writing the Dazzler program that we were displaying there. But that's how we would get people's attention, to the store and get them to stop and come in and then the other picture above it is a picture of me in the store. And actually, I've got my hand on a display case there that has the Byte magazines inside the display. And when I was talking to the people at Byte Magazine, Virginia Pesky was the owner of Byte Magazine, and Carl Helmers was her editor. And I contacted Virginia, and I was interested in getting the magazine to do something about the Byte Shops. And if you recall, when we came up with the name Byte Shop, we were wanting to have people associate us with the magazine in terms of who we might be. And so what I did was I took Processor Technologies display case that they provided to me with circuit boards that they made, and I put past issues of Byte Magazine. I think I had probably 6 or 8 magazines in there. And what I told Virginia is that they should do a page on the jewels of the Byte Shop were the Byte magazines, and here they are in a display case. And one of the things that we did, which was interesting for the magazine or the publishing industry, is the policy that they had and the way they distribute magazines out to the public were with what were called rack jobbers. And these guys would get bundles of magazines sent to them, and they would go out to newsstands and places to deliver the magazines. And everything that wasn't sold, what they would do is when they dropped off the latest issue of the magazine, they would tear the covers off of the old magazines, and then they would credit the retailer with the price of that issue that didn't sell through. Well, there was so much interest in the personal computer industry at the time that I was actually contacting the publishers and buying all of the magazines that they had that were going out of circulation. And what I would do is, because there was so much interest and demand in it, is with the Byte magazines, you could buy a new issue of Byte magazine for $1. And so every month that one of their magazines got older, I added another $1 to the price. So I was selling magazines for $2, $3, $4, and people were collecting these magazines, and there were articles in the magazines that were printed that were useful to people that were trying to figure out things to do with a computer, because that's what all of the articles that Carl Helmers was writing about in the Byte magazine. So there was real value in the old magazines. And when I called the publisher of Popular Electronics, Messick, Joe Messick was his name. Joe couldn't believe it. You know, here he is. He's the guy that's running. I don't know what they called him in the magazine business, whether they were actually a president or chief executive or whatever. But he was the guy that was thoughts for Popular Electronics. And when I called him and told him that I wanted him to send me these back issues, he actually couldn't believe it. And I was willing to pay the same price for a back issue that I was for a current issue. And then once again, I was marking the price up. But you can see that in the store, I think you have some other pictures there that I was showing you where the walls, you know, we were trying to put a lot of information in the public's hands when they came into the store. You know, there was a real education process here. Like I said, I was calling it the greatest show on earth coming into one of those stores, and obviously having material in there that people could buy for $1 or $2 and go home and learn about these things was important. So we were trying to show off the that particular display area. I don't know how clear you can see, but you know, people would come in to get the paper tape to put in their teletype.
I see that down there, yeah.
So there's a supply business going on as well as the magazine business there. And that area of the store was the area where you walked right in through those front doors you can see in the lower picture. You would come in, and that was our main display area. And then at the back wall, you had the cash register counter that I was talking about, where a Business Week had taken a picture of me there. And then there was a demo room that was in the back part of that floor space there, where we had it was a darker room where all of these displays could be, you know, more prominent, and people would go back there and actually have hands-on experience with it. And behind the counter that had the cash register, that area in the back was our supply room and our office for getting office things taken care of.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. What else do we got here? Well, that's the same picture, isn't it? Yeah, these pictures are really grainy. I don't know. These were like scans. I don't know if you can even see that one.
Yeah, I see it. It's once again, it's that same area. And I think in that picture, I was more casually dressed. You know, the other thing that was happening, you know, I think we did T-shirts, and we were saying, take a nibble out of, you know, your Byte, you know, and people didn't, you know what is a nibble, what is a byte. You know, one of the issues that I had with Regis McKenna, and I used to debate this all the time. People, you know, when they heard the word byte, they thought that I was saying bike, and they thought I had a bicycle shop. And so I was talking to Regis about it, and I said, you know, nobody knows what a byte is, and you know, do people even know what a nibble is? You know, a nibble
Right.
is just a bytes, you know. So, and the byte was a bit, and you know, there were bits, bytes, and nibbles, and so the computer terminology was another thing that people were wrestling with in terms of understanding what was going on here. And you know, once again, you can see now that shows you an area of the store where you know, we would actually go through those computers so fast that when we got a delivery of 10 or 12 computers, I would just take them in the box that they were shipped in and just stack them up on the floor. And then on top of the boxes, we would have one of the computers that was inside there, so people, these things we really didn't need a place for inventory, because as soon as computers were coming in, they were just bouncing off the floor and going out the door. And then, as I said before, the other phenomena was, weeks later, somebody would come back in, like Ray Lynn, who was the Byte Shop of Campbell, or he was a programmer over at Basic Timeshare, and he was interested. He got his Altair computer and came back and said, "Look, I want to develop software for this, and I'm going to leave Basic Timeshare and go over, and start a Byte Shop. How do I get one of these dealerships?" And Todd Anderson was the Byte Shop of Santa Clara, and Todd was an engineer at Intel, and once again had bought a computer and had put it together, and came back and said, "I want to be Byte Shop number 2." And so I told Todd, I said, "Well, go 5 miles down the road." I said, "That's kind of what Tandy Corporation is doing with Radio Shacks, and find an area there. And I want to have Byte Shops 5 miles from everywhere, around the United States." So that was the geographic territory that I was allowing no competition, within that area. And once again, Ray Lynn, he was Byte Shop number 3. And I told Ray to go to Campbell. That was 5 miles down the road from Santa Clara, which is where Todd's store was. So we were starting to set a precedent there. And then Byte Shop number 4 came along, and that was an engineer. The interesting story there. The guy was actually a vice president of Lockheed Missiles and Space, and he was concerned with his position there at Lockheed that he might be in violation of some kind of an employment situation. So he wanted to remain anonymous in terms of ownership of the store, and was asking me if I had an area, a territory available that was close by. And I said, "Well, there's nothing up in Palo Alto, and Stanford University is there. You could be Byte Shops of Palo Alto." And he said, "Well, how do I get somebody to run it?" And I told him, I said, "Look, the manager of the Byte Shop here in Mountain View is looking to get more involved in the business. And I've just got him working behind the counter here." I said, why don't I introduce you to Bob Moody, and Bob can become the manager of your store up there." So they put that together, and now we had another Byte Shop 5 miles to the north, and then we went to San Mateo after that, and so forth. But we were kind of trying to find out what is the density, in a metropolitan area where, these stores would survive each other, and these are all questions that, being corporate Byte Shop, that were issues that were on my platter, at Byte Incorporated, to figure out these things, because nobody had done it before. And so, can you get a good return on your investment in your store if you've got these guys 5 miles apart? Can they be successful? Of course, right. We were in a computer saturated area in Silicon Valley, so it wasn't too hard to be successful there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's going to depend a lot on how population dense is the area, like New York, and the part of California you were in, maybe Chicago, but other places that are less population dense, you probably would need them further apart, I would think. So, well, I'm amazed that you can remember all of the different. I mean, you could remember which stores came in what order and all of that. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was really my life at the time. As I said, stores a month. I was spending a lot of time, on airplanes and flying around. And of course, when I went down to the Los Angeles area, I think one of the pictures that I sent to you there was the computer fair in San Francisco at Brooks Hall, where Apple was introducing the Apple II computer and had a nice island booth there. And I had a 20-foot booth where I was selling the dealerships, the Byte Shop dealerships, and showing a map on the wall where people could see, how we were expanding, and in California particularly, and LA became the next area that I was focused on in terms of going in and developing stores. And I would actually fly down there on a commuter plane in the morning and catch the shuttle over to the Marriott Hotel. And I actually ran my business out of the Marriott there. I would have set up luncheon appointments with people and breakfast appointments, and they'd walk into the hotel, and there I am sitting there in a seating area in the lobby, and get out my briefcase and my presentation, and then I'd be on the 5 o'clock flight back that night, not even staying in the hotel, but just doing business right there. And one of my friends that had the going back to the rep business, he was the Southern California rep that I shared a lot of product lines with me. He kind of laughed at it and said, Paul, he said, these people are thinking that you're down here and staying in this hotel and doing business, and you're just moving off to the next deal, So, but that's the way it was.
All right, that's the end of this particular episode. I want to give very special thanks to Paul Terrell for spending his time to tell us his story about the Byte Shop. And there will be additional parts of the interview discussing Byte Shop and other topics with Paul in the future, so stay tuned for that. I provided links in the show notes for any websites that we discussed during this podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. Also, I very much encourage you to provide feedback for the show at Apple Podcasts or on the website or via email at floppydays@gmail.com. You can do so via Twitter at floppydays, on Mastodon at floppydays at oldbyte.space, on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays, or on the Discord server whose link is at floppydays.com. Floppy Days is available for streaming at TuneIn, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.